All right, let's just jump right in. Today we're going to unpack a pretty complex theory from our source material, a theory about how global power is actually held in place. We're going to explore these massive interlocking systems that, according to the source, are all designed for one single purpose: control.
And this quote, wow, this really sets the tone for everything we're about to talk about. The core idea we're digging into is that the general population isn't really being governed so much as it's being, well, managed, like livestock. It's a really provocative place to start, so let's see how this theory gets built.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll look at it through four main pillars. First up, engineering the population. Then, we'll get into controlling the narrative. After that, we'll dive into the financial matrix, and we'll wrap it all up with the all-seeing eye.
Okay, so the first pillar in this whole architecture of control is us, the human being. The argument in the source material is that the most powerful way to control a society isn't just with laws or police, but by getting in right at the biological and psychological level.
And this next term is, well, it's pretty chilling. The source attributes it to Henry Kissinger, calling people programmable bio-robotoids. The implication here is just massive. It suggests a worldview where people aren't seen as individuals with free will, but more like biological machines that can be programmed and told what to do.
And that brings us to the medical industry. The source doesn't frame it as a system for making people healthy, but as a business model that's actually built on keeping people sick. The argument goes like this. There's way more money to be made in creating long-term treatments that just manage a disease, because a cure gets rid of your customer.
The source points to a few very specific examples of this in practice. First, it talks about competitive breeding, the alleged use of gene editing to create smarter babies. Then it brings up gain-of-function research, the idea of creating a virus in a lab so you can then sell the profitable solution for it. And finally, it frames vaccine mandates as two things: a test to see if people will comply, and of course, a huge moneymaker.
Now, moving from the biological to the psychological, the source points a finger at our modern education system, calling it the Prussian system. The idea here is that by taking kids away from their parents at a young age, the system can basically mold them into obedient workers and soldiers who are good at following orders, not necessarily at thinking for themselves.
So let's move on to our second pillar. If you can engineer the person, the logical next step is to engineer their reality, right? This is all about controlling the information they consume, what they see, what they hear, and ultimately what they believe.
This timeline here lays out a few of the key moments that the source highlights. It kind of traces this path from early mind control experiments, like MKUltra, to the moment the term conspiracy theory was allegedly turned into a weapon to just shut down debate. And it goes all the way up to a law in the 2010s that made it legal for the government to use its own propaganda on its own people.
And this quote, which the source pulls from a Forbes article, is presented as kind of the ultimate command from on high. Don't think for yourself. Trust us, the official sources, and only us. According to this theory, the end goal is to make everyone completely reliant on approved information.
This is actually fascinating. The source brings up an old CIA manual on sabotage, but the tactics aren't about planting bombs. They're about planting bureaucracy. Things like talking as much as possible in meetings, referring everything to committees, arguing over tiny details. The goal is to just clog up the gears of society, to make everything so frustrating and inefficient that people just give up. It's control through exhaustion.
Okay, on to pillar number 3, the financial matrix. This part of the theory argues that the economic systems we live in are maybe the most important tool for keeping the public dependent and unable to ever really break free.
So the theory describes this huge shift in what money even is. It used to be what the source calls alchemy. Turning a real physical thing like gold into currency. But now it's called conjuration. Value is just created out of thin air, which of course makes it a whole lot easier for insiders to manipulate the system.
And that leads right into this huge concept, artificial scarcity. The source argues that key resources, like oil, aren't actually running out. It claims there's evidence that oil actually regenerates inside the earth, but that this info is deliberately suppressed. Why? To maintain a stranglehold on the market, keep prices high, and keep everyone dependent on the people who control the supply. And this slide shows a perfect modern example of that conjuration idea in action. The source breaks down crypto pump-and-dump schemes as just a massive, incredibly fast way to transfer wealth. You create hype out of nothing, lure the public in, and then the creators sell everything at the top, leaving everyone else holding the bag.
And just to put a number on it, to show you the mind-boggling scale of this stuff, the source points out that the Trump coin hit a peak valuation of $36 billion. It's an example of the sheer size of the financial tools being created and played with, all basically conjured out of nothing.
So this brings us to the last piece of the whole puzzle: technology. This is the infrastructure that, according to the source, watches everyone, enforces the rules, and basically holds this entire system of control together. The source talks about this concept it calls the beast system. It sounds like something out of a movie, right? It's described as a kind of flying supercomputer, the ultimate surveillance machine that can spy on every single person, everywhere on the planet, all at the same time. We're talking total information awareness. Nothing goes unseen. And here's how a system like that is supposedly justified to the public. This quote frames mass surveillance as a good thing, a tool for making sure people behave. The premise is super simple and, yeah, a little bit terrifying. If people know they're always being watched, they're not going to step out of line.
And this technology isn't just about watching individuals. The source explains how new mapping tools can supposedly reveal what it calls a fractal web of non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. These maps allegedly trace how money secretly flows through this incredibly complex network, all to fund specific political agendas from behind the scenes.
And that really brings us to the final crucial question. The entire theory we've just walked through is built on these systems of control that depend on secrecy and a huge imbalance of power. So if technology gives a tiny group of people an all-seeing eye to watch everybody else, who's left to watch them?